Hello and welcome to the Swim Brief. Here we are, neck deep in the Olympics. I'm joined as always from the Speedo World Headquarters, Eric Weiken. Eric, how are you?
Doing well, sitting back in my apartment for the first time for more than 3 days since early June, I think. So it's been nice.
You've been to a few swim meets, huh?
Yeah, 3 sectionals in a row, trials for 10 days.
You gonna have to go back out for nationals?
Monday I leave for Summer Champs. Sounds like a rec league meet, but I go to Summer Champs on Monday. So,
well, I'm going. T-shirt too. Summer Champs T-shirt, and then you get like a little star with Speedo rep on the back.
So you can get best time badges down your arm.
Very good.
I mean, for our local listeners, I'll be at the Jack Hafner Memorial Summer League meet tomorrow in Medford, New Jersey, 9 to 12. If you're interested in trying out.
I'll be roughing it in Irvine, California, staying at the Renaissance.
Oh, man. They couldn't even get you in the Westin? It's unbelievable. The budget's going way downhill. All right, hold on. We got to introduce the other guy who comes on here every week. I'm forgetting his name at the moment. We've actually asked Joel Rawlings. Yes, we've actually asked Joel to pretend as if he watched some of this time.
Yes.
Because some of the listeners complained, Joel, that it was pretty obvious that you hadn't watched the races that you were talking about.
Yeah.
So you did that, right?
Watch races?
The Olympics. You're watching, right?
Yeah. Next Thursday it starts, right? It's going to be awesome. I'm looking forward to those races. That'll be good. That Phelps guy, he was looking strong.
Yeah.
Ian Thorpe's coming back, right? Oh.
All right, let's get to it. There's been a lot of really good stuff that's happened. Of course, I haven't had the chance to talk to you guys since before the Olympics started. I recorded a podcast on Tuesday where I talked about some of the stuff earlier on the meet. So a lot of what I'm going to bring up is going to be very focused on the last 2 nights. But of course, if you've got some stuff that's burning inside of you, you're going to get an opportunity to discuss that as well. First, I want to talk about the women's 200 free that led off, I guess, 2 days ago, finals. Sort of billed as round 2 between Ledecky and Titmus, but we didn't get, as opposed to the 400 where I think we got a pretty good Ledecky, like in terms of how quick her performance was. We didn't get a very sharp Ledecky. And one of the reasons I want to bring this up is because I did not see in any media anywhere anyone saying, hey, something's off with that Katie Ledecky. Maybe she's not going to dominate all her races, except on this podcast. Joel Rawlings. Joel, what do you like? Catch the listeners up a little bit on what you thought beforehand and what you've seen in watching some of these Katie Ledecky races so far.
I just looking at her races from Rio to races she was having at trials, the way she was breathing is really like it was kind of forced up high to the right, forced up. It's really lifting up. Throwing, and you can see now with the Olympics that overhead cam how much that's driving her whole body in different directions a little bit, creating that form drag of side to side, a little extra wave and things. And it wasn't like that in Rio. And so the only thing I was wondering is is it a sinus infection? Is it something where it's affecting her respiratory system, where she's kind of feeling the need to force that breath like that? Obviously with training out, we don't know what she's doing, and with COVID, you don't know how consistent she was able to go. So it was just kind of hoping a woman that fast, she can just swim through trials. It's not like she's rested at all for this meet anyway. Let's see how sharp she can get at the Olympics. But I think a lot of the things that we saw in trials we're still seeing now. Physically she's probably ready to go, but just the stroke looks off. It looks kind of clunky, especially at 200. Yeah. So that's don't want to throw all the technical terms like clunky out there like that, but
right.
Maybe get like a footnotes or something to go back to that. Yeah.
Yeah. Eric, I mean, do you have any theories on why, because she came back later in the session and crushed that 1500 in comparison to the field. Do you have any inkling of why it seems to be why she struggled more at a shorter distance than perhaps a longer distance where we got the 800 here left to go?
It just seems like it's a little bit easier stroke to handle in that 1500. I mean, we've all seen it. Anytime a swimmer has the ability to slow things down a little bit, there's going to be a little bit more of a chance of rhythm and flow. There's no expectation of forcing things. You saw in that 200, or you saw in the back half of the 400, and you saw it at the 200. When she tried to go, she went from what her normal stroke length would have been to what looked like, no offense to her, but she really looked like a 10-year-old trying to sprint and just thrash as fast as she could, as hard as she could, because she didn't have anything else to go on. So, Joel talks about seeing that early in trials, and even beforehand, you saw a little bit of that upward movement. It just looks like she doesn't have any length, and it's really frustrating to see somebody who's clearly aerobically and conditioning wise 152, 354, 802, but then the stroke is such where it's 155, 156, 357. I feel really bad for it. I'm not upset at the athlete. I mean, it's just, the way things went over the last year or two, it's just things changed for whatever reason, and hoping that, this 800 will be in the wheelhouse of that stroke that she's going to be able to maintain. There's not going to be any other doubles within that session to be able to really have the stroke that she wants to carry that 800. Is there going to be a world record? Probably not, but it would be nice to see her, within 2 to 3 seconds of that PR that she has in it. And then, she's supposed to be swimming through 2024. I don't know much about her agreements with her sponsors, but right now I know she's got a SUA agreement through 2024, which means that she's probably swimming at least through that. Hopefully a nice break and some analysis of performances and just clean things up,
Yeah. I think there's, go ahead, Joel.
I was going to say, when you look at that 200, like with Titmus versus, actually the whole field, you could see like with the Ledecky going into the walls, there's a lot of deceleration going on. She's lifting into the turns again, which is a kind of weird thing. I don't know if that's a carryover from the air or just kind of like trying to get up and in. Underwater, she's still great. And you can see that accelerating through and coming off the walls really well. And that's what I love about this Olympics, how they're showing the meters per second where, she's able to really maintain some speed off the wall. But going into the wall, it's definitely, even in the mile, you could see that was, she was kind of decelerating a lot. And so with Tim, it's just like a textbook 200. I mean, how she raced that back half is just insane, So I wouldn't say textbook. I mean, it's beyond belief how great that last half was. I mean, that's something textbook and what you want your kids to do. But
they'll make the next textbook based on that too.
I think they will. They definitely will. How she's getting into the walls, out of the walls. She wasn't phased by the women next to her. They were out so fast. She swam her race and then closed hard. And again, you can see how she's able to change tempos right now. I don't think Ledecky has that ability where, again, she looks like she's trying to find that speed of 100 or 200, and it's just not there right now.
Yeah, a couple things that came up here. You referenced the turns, and I talked about this a little bit on my podcast on Tuesday. It does. I like the way that you turned. It does look to me almost like she knows she has an advantage off the wall, but the turns almost look defensive to me in terms of like she's trying to load up for a big turn, right, to like get herself some momentum back in the race. And it's just very interesting to me. I start thinking about the mind-body part of this, and I think when somebody's just like dominating. Like Ledecky was, if you watch some of those older races where there's just nobody else in the frame sometimes when she's finishing, like watch the 400 free from Rio and, look how far behind the next finisher is in that race. When you have that kind of sort of physical domination over the competition, of course it's easier to swim with confidence and like execute on what your plan is. Do you know what I mean? And so it's interesting to me now that she has somebody that is at her level or a little bit better than her level right now. You can say Titmus is above her level at this meet. it's revealing a few fundamental cracks in her racing approach. And this is a person who, by all accounts, was the best racer out there. So that part of it is interesting to me. And then the other part, if you put it in the context, this is a swimming podcast. We're not going to talk too much about Simone Biles, but just watching her emotional reaction after the 1500 was a strong reminder of just the insane amount of pressure Ledecky had. Like that there was the usual Olympic hype machine, and then a year extra of pent up Olympic hype machine. And, the fact that people are following in a different way, you're competing in an empty state. I think there's a lot going on that I think we're not even going to be able to sort of parse through right now as the meet's going on. But definitely, as Eric points out, there's going to be a lot of ground to cover when she looks back at this with a coach or several people, hopefully after the end of this meet.
I think, Phelps ruined it for everyone, dude. He put that bar so high that it's like, I look at, like, when I watch the Olympics with my mom, that's the way I kind of know. Like, my wife has always said, there's no such thing as a famous swim coach.
Right.
There's such thing as superstar swimmers. Because if my mom knows who that is, that's a pretty big swimmer. And so right now with all these new swimmers, she knows Ledecky. And so when she sees her come in fifth, she's like, oh my God, what's happened? Right. And everyone else in the world that swimming kind of goes, well, this isn't really her event. This is these things and like that. But again, you got that hype machine and all the other stuff that's out there. The moms of the world are like, well, what's going on? And so all of a sudden that pressure kind of crushes over. And you're right. You see that in the mile. I thought that mile was a defensive race where she just knows maybe she's not 100% on, but she's so much better that she can hold people off the walls and just kind of maintain that distance and just run with that. It looked like it hurt, but you're right. That looked like a relief like no other, rather than someone like, well, of course I'm winning. It was someone that, like, I made it through. I can take a deep breath now. Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about Bobby Fink. We've been calling him Bobby Finke on this podcast, and they called him Bobby Fink last night. And I don't even know what to think because, who can trust Rowdy on anything? Or Dan Hicks.
Other than you should make sure you can see everybody on every breath, and you shouldn't focus on the world record line.
And reaction times are extremely important. That is how you measure how good somebody's start is. You don't look at anything else. You just look at the reaction time, and if somebody's a couple hundredths of a second faster in the time it takes them to leave the block after the sound goes, that means that they are much better at the start.
Make or break.
These are facts, okay, according to Rowdy Gates. Okay, that felt good. Okay, I got a little bit out of my system. This is a family podcast, obviously. Joel's got his kid in the background. And, I know that there are kids that I coach who listen to this podcast. So I want to make sure that I'm trying to find some texts from our group text, of course. But I don't want to use some of the language that...
Oh, that'd be me then. Right. Okay.
Yeah, right.
And me.
Okay. We're sorry.
See, you guys sent too many text messages last night, and now I don't. Well,
while you scroll through it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. As we were talking, like, nice coverage on the 800. Again, I get it. NBC's really not, like, we're not going to show the whole thing, but yeah, it's that closing half he had. Well, again, we're going to see the opening and then the closing. I just go back to fanboy of everything they're doing in Florida. I mean, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, worth mentioning because I get reminded of it daily in my office.
I'm sure you should.
I'm not sure we've mentioned it on the podcast, but just so people know, Florida, of qualified a male Olympian in every freestyle event. They won every freestyle event at trials. 50, 100, 200. You got to get Dressel, Kieran Smith, Fink. Okay. But so what I was going to say is I just want to read some of our live reactions to the men's 800 free last night. And, so I don't use a dirty word that people typically use. I'm just going to supplant a dirty word in the world of this podcast. So I'm just going to say Schubert instead. Okay. So the race finishes. I texted you guys, what the Schubert did I just see? Eric texted back, what period, the period, Schubert. That was Schuberting crazy. And then Joel texted, what did I miss? I'm on a Zoom call with the Masters board meeting. So that's just a peek inside of the world. And then Eric, without any cuss words, replies, the craziest last 50 in a distance event in recent memory, which I think was really an understatement. I don't know. There was 1% cranky swim coach in me that of course it doesn't really matter when you win gold at the Olympics, and whatever you did before that is basically justified. But there was that 1% cranky swim coach in me that went, well, 26.4 at the end. I mean, he probably could have pushed it a little bit more there.
Yeah. Could have been 39 instead of 41.
Like, come on, man.
Yeah.
Don't save it all up for the end.
He goes a couple tenths faster somewhere in the middle, and all of a sudden he comes in silver. We're not having this talk, man. Bring it home fast. That's awesome. It's the Olympics. It's all about the gold medal. That's basically it.
Eric, you got anything else to add on that swim?
I think it was maybe an edge ahead of fifth place going into that last wall, and came out with the underwaters that we've seen from Florida all year. We saw it at NCAA's from their distance guys, the 500, the mile. They were just Kieran Smith in the 200 and the 400. I mean, these guys have dedicated themselves to their walls and vault course, and you don't see it enough. I'm hoping that this is gonna continue. We saw it with Phelps in 2008 when everybody was like, "Oh, you should stay underwater," and we're seeing it now. And just it was so fun to watch that last 50. I've never had that much fun watching a distance race. Just wondering what the Italians doing out in the end lane. Circle swimming at half of it, and then the other guys are kind of back halfing it and reeling it in, and then Fink just took it down. Yeah, Joel's son. I feel that for that distance race.
He's a Florida fan already too.
Yeah. He loved it. But seriously, I mean, this is actually one place where I agree with Rowdy. I mean, it was a 200 free closing last 50 of an 800. So completely insane. I was caught completely off guard by it. And, normally I'm just trying to, I'm watching with my wife, Kate, and I'm just trying to be such a smarty pants and go like, hey, honey, here's what's going to happen. Oh, watch this. And I was just sitting there like, what the Schubert did I just see? What happened? And she was like, who's that guy? And then he even looked stunned afterwards. Like, it took him a few seconds to realize, like, oh, yeah, I just won gold medal in the 800 free. I just blew past all those guys. So really incredible swim. And it's underrated part of this, and that I want to point out is, people are always, because I talk to a lot of non-American people are always ready for that moment where the U.S. looks like we're slipping as the most dominant swimming country in the world. And getting an unexpected gold, which I would say this is probably one of the most unexpected golds, really sort of tips the balances in terms of, somehow very often, despite whatever other struggles happen, you get to the end of the meet and you go, oh, wow, the U.S. dominated this meet. And I think a race like this will make a big difference. We're really interested to see what he does in the 1500 going forward. How does this affect the guys he's going to be competing against? The same group of guys? Paul Trineri, is he Is he all the way there? Is he 100% recovered from mono like he says he was? Is the EPO still wearing off? I don't know. So we'll just have to wait to find out, right? Obviously, probably cycled somewhat off for the Olympics because the higher likelihood of getting drug tested there.
I think it's great for USA Distance real quick because we've talked about this. Joel is a staunch anti-sprint coach, but seeing the success from the Sandpiper women and then seeing Florida doing what they are doing, that it's just bringing light to distance programs in our country. And it's not to say that everybody's going to have to mirror what they're doing, but at least take some of the things that they are doing in the distances that they are with, Kieran Smith's walls in the 400. Like, stop ignoring this in your distance sets in your clubs. Hold yourself to a standard. And I'm hoping that's what we see, because that's the biggest thing that we have an advantage of with such a short course focused country about NCAA is that just bring it into the big pool.
So what I'm hearing is everybody should do 70K a week on taper with a 1,500 for time at the end. That's what I hear from you, Eric.
If you're winning gold, then that's the
make sure it's suited.
That's your new. You're no longer USRPT. Get that volume up to 70 grand.
11 practices a week.
That's right. Okay. Finally, I want to talk about the men's 100 free. Cause I wrestled I had morning practice today, so everybody shed a tear for me. And I live on the Eastern, in the Eastern time zone. So, I was debating whether to stay up for the 100 free, and I've had my fair share of sporting events where I go, I'm going to stay up for this. The worst of all being when I lived in Denmark and the NFL playoff game between the Patriots and the Denver Broncos didn't start till midnight. And I had to watch that awful game where Peyton Manning could barely lift his arm above his head, but somehow the Broncos won. But I digress. Okay. I made the decision.
Is there a point or that's usually, like Eric and I grew up in Wisconsin. Usually stories had a point at some time within the context.
Bucks and 6.
Bucks and 6.
Go Pats. Okay.
All right. So you saw the 100 free.
Yeah. I said, let's getting back to the 100 free. It was worth staying up for.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Incredible race. Here's another thing when we look at the medal count. This meet hasn't had nearly enough Caleb Dressel yet. We still got Dressel's fly to go. We still got the 50 free from Dressel. And I think he was the one U.S. star where there was still some lingering, like, how's he going to swim at the meet? And he answers the question, I'm going to swim awesome against an awesome field, and I'm going to take gold in aside from sprint haters like Joel, the premier event in swimming. Joel, what else did you think about this 100 free?
I thought, like we talked about the Timus's 200, I thought, again, if you're going to create a textbook, there it is on the 100. Maybe you're not going to tell your age group kids keep on breathing left like you did on the front half, but again, coming off that wall, how he shifted tempos with like 20 meters to go, no breath, like last 15 meters, charging into the finish and an extension on the wall. I mean, everything was just money. I thought his turn was off. I thought he was too far away on that. So he might have, I think Eric said in the text, like he might have overswam that first 50 a little bit, where he's just a little bit out of control. But again, it's been kind of the build up to this one moment. And I think this is exactly what Olympics in the United States needed, was that guy touching the wall, good-looking guy sitting on the rope, the camera zipping in, and it becomes like that commercial where now they're going to keep on going that versus the Phelps, like they keep on showing old Phelps like power videos. Now they've got the new poster boy kind of a thing. Like again, my mom being the guide for who might be a superstar. She doesn't know Dressel. Now she does. She knows exactly who that is, and I think that's exactly what we needed for this to kind of get going. I know every swim club is kind of waiting for that Olympic bump because the numbers are so far down throughout this country because of COVID. That's the kind of face of swimming. That's the kind of swim from that everyone needed. All of a sudden, you're going to get a lot of people signing up to swim because of that race and everything he's going to do from here on in.
Yeah, I mean, so did your mom look at you and go, "Why didn't you get a full sleeve tattoo, Joel?" Or
She just kind of looked over and go, "You got your father's genetics. I get it. It's not your fault. It's not your fault." It was a nice moment. It was kind of like in Good Will Hunting. It's not your fault. She just hugged me like that. If I just wept because I can't be big, strong, good looking, it would just.
Oh man, yeah. Eric, underrated part of this is that Kyle Chalmers was the defending champion and swam amazing. He's been swimming amazing in this entire meet. So it's not like it was definitely not an easy victory for Dressel. He had to fight all the way to the end and just sort of grind this one out. What else did you think watching it?
That he did really well with probably the weight of that heat. I mean, yeah, you try to focus on your own lane. Kolesnikov having a great meet. Chalmers 46.4 on that anchor. We don't know what we were going to see out of Popovich. Like, we could see the race that we saw, or we could see him go at 46.9, just such a wild card out there. And anybody else, given how this meet is going, could have had a great race. We saw him go long a bit into that turn. I think he maybe had a little bit too much pre-workout going into that race as it was, because he was all kinds of jacked up on that first 50. But again, he's an emotional guy. He's very dedicated to what he's doing. And yes, full disclosure, I work for Speedo. He's a Speedo athlete. I have been able to see and hear some of the things from him. And you saw it in some of the interview and the work that was happening. And then you saw it in the just emotional unloading after that race. Like, just, it meant so much to him.
Yeah.
And it was really nice to see it. And like Joel said, this is a big thing for USA Swimming, and just him being able to connect with his family after that race. It was just like, holy cow, if this doesn't get you signing up your kid for swim lessons, then you have no heart. I mean, it was such an incredible experience for that 5 minutes that was there. And I think that certainly, I'm hoping that it settles him down, because he was certainly jacked up for that race and swam like it in this 100 fly. Like, all that pressure internally is gone. That 100 fly, I think, is going to be much easier to handle, and that 50 free is still going to be tough. But yeah, as long as he hits the start like he's been doing for the last 5 years, he's got a nice advantage of a half a body length to a body length in these short races. Yeah,
I think anecdotally, since you guys bring up the swim team's recruiting efforts, and I was not joking about the fact that I'm headed to a summer league meet. We've been hitting the trail and sponsoring local summer meets here in southern New Jersey all summer, and I can just tell you that at the beginning of the summer, when we organized a tryout, it was easy enough for one coach to show up and run a few swimmers through. I don't have an exact number for the first tryout. The second tryout that we held this summer, which was about 2 weeks ago, was the first time I ever pulled up to our pool and could not find a place to park. There were 35 kids. We're our total team size, our capacity is for 300 swimmers, right? And it took us 3 coaches like an hour to try out all the kids. Next Tuesday, 53 kids are coming in for tryouts. So anecdotally, there is something going on. It is in our case giving us some hope that we can recover some of those pre-COVID numbers. And you can't even understate the importance of this, because if that sort of shrinkage that we saw in COVID settles in or even regresses from there, it's going to have really, really wide-ranging implications for anybody that makes their living off of this sport. And I'm one of those people. So I find this stuff incredibly important. And I think, honestly, and I ask the kids that I coach every night, did you watch the Olympics? And some of them aren't watching, right? Some of them are, and I think that's great. And a lot of them that are watching are finding this meet pretty entertaining. I mean, I think if I look back on all the Olympics that I've watched, I'm finding it incredibly entertaining to watch the finals, especially because so many of the races are so close, that the depth in all of these events has solidified to the point where it's becoming much less obvious who's going to win. Like, did anyone feel confident that one person was definitely going to win that men's 200 breast last night? No, we'll get to that later. But so I think it's, as much as we may bemoan some lack of American dominance, I don't think anyone can deny that these races are really competitive and that is enjoyable to watch, because I think an underrated part of how swim meets can get boring sometimes is when there's somebody who's just so dominant that the race is a foregone conclusion who's going to win before it starts. And a lot of the sports that we watch, we don't know. Unless you have Tom Brady on your team, you don't know that you're going to win the Super Bowl that year, like if you have Aaron Rodgers, you're not winning. So that's sort of the difference.
We see what you're trying to do here. We see what you're trying to do. I think one of the things is how they've always marketed the Olympics, and having that dominant swimmer became such a norm. And like I said, kind of jokingly, it's felt ruined it for everyone. Is just like the Patriots stuff. People say they hate a dynasty, but they love a dynasty because they always watch the Yankees playing whoever in the World Series. They'll always watch the Patriots. Well, they used to watch the Patriots. Now they'll watch whoever Tom Brady's with.
The Bucks.
But you also loved watching a Phelps. You watch that name kind of recognition, and so that was the thing you always got to. And we always kind of like you love the close race, or you loved watching like the Janet Evans pulling away from everyone, not even the same field, and you love that. And you look at like USA basketball right now, where they're not dominating, and people are just turning it off, because I think it's going to be a transition period where we have to understand like it's not what it used to be. There's a lot of really good coaches in swimming all around the world. And, I see too many times on the troll boards, like, well, they all come here to train. No, they don't. They definitely don't. And they're all doing really well. And it's really cool to see each country with their different things where they're really starting to like take off in. And so that dominance is going to be gone. And so I think we need to change our mindset, and NBC needs to change its mindset to kind of accommodate for that and start to appreciate just what you said, just those tight races and how fun that is, and how the gold isn't a given. It used to be like, well, if you don't win a gold, why'd you even go?
Right. Right. Eric, any other final thoughts before I get to my final thought?
No, go ahead.
All right.
Have at it.
Hold on. Let me just roll up the sleeves here. So I sent you guys a video, and I've referenced it a few times here on this podcast. I've become a fan of the YouTube channel, More Plates, More Dates. There was a really nice one that he did recently about a Russian gymnast who won gold. And I believe it was in the all around 3 months after rupturing his Achilles tendon. Okay. And for anybody that's followed sports, that that injury is not a 3-month recovery, that elite world-class athletes with freak genetics, wonderful nutrition, all the best doctors, blah, 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 usually take 9 months to a year to recover from that kind of injury. And the point of bringing that up is not because I know that, or Derek from More Plates, More Dates knows that these guys cheating, but we're just doing the math, okay? We're doing a little bit of the math on
Kevin Durant took Klay Thompson a little more than 3 weeks.
Yeah, of 3 months. I mean, Kevin Durant over a year, right, to come back from a similar injury. So what can I say? I think it's worth bringing up in the context of, and I'm going to Schubert a little bit on your point that you just made, Joel, is that in watching the Olympics, we tend to just like pretend like this isn't there. And of course it is. The NBC is not going to cover it, right? Because you don't kill the brand of what it is you're promoting. But one of the things that you can't extract from the mental and psychological pressure of this event is if you are, in fact, competing without the aid of performance-enhancing drugs, okay, you are going up against a field where there are for sure, including the sport of swimming, people that are leveraging performance-enhancing drugs to gain an undue advantage. And having not coached up to that like top level, I can't even imagine what it must feel like to be in that competitive situation and to watch somebody just do something that you know is not really possible in terms of whether it be improving over a very short frame of time or recovery from an injury over a very unbelievable short window of time. And, I'm struck by it because I think to bring this full circle to one of my other hobby horses, I think that a lot of abusive coaching behavior in the U.S. is justified by the competitive results on the other end. That people say, well, yeah, but come on, this is a competition. This is what we're doing. And I think that's wrong because the second that we as coaches, we compromise the value where we go, look, everybody else is doing it, I got to do this to compete. We've lost the thread of what sports is all about and why we're involved in it. And I see people actually make that excuse. I hardly ever hear you're a fringe weirdo if you think hey, why not push the envelope a little bit with PADs if, they're not going to test for it or everybody else is doing it. That makes you you'd be unemployable. But if you, if you as a coach push the boundaries of what's the proper way to treat somebody, then all of a sudden that's justified because of the competitive results on the other end. And I just don't think that's right. You and I, we were discussing in the text chat as well. I mean, I think for everything else that's been covered in gymnastics, look back at the Kerri Strug vault from 1996. I remember it. I remember being inspired by it and thinking it was such a wonderful story and how good
I was
everything
there.
was. Yep, 100%. And when I just Googled and I looked up the Wikipedia page, okay, she hurts herself. She's limping around. She's 19 years old. She goes to her coach. She says, should I go again? Bela Karolyi says, you have to. You have to. Right? He doesn't go you can do it. I think I remembered it as him lifting her up and being you can do it. You can do this for the team. No, he told her she had to. Okay. And I think about that in the context of sport. I think about it in swimming. I was joking with you guys and everybody else I could talk to. I was so excited that Chupkov did not medal in the 200 breast because just like everything else, I don't know that Chupkov is not on the level, but having seen him compete at the European junior level for Russia and just looking at a swimming stroke where I'm sorry, you cannot tell me that that's just his style of swimming and it's super effective. He sucks at breaststroke and somehow he's the world record holder. Doing the math, I think there's something not right there. And it's this has been a long and winding rant. It's gone in a lot of different directions. It's such it is. I don't have a writing outlet anymore, so I don't really know what to do about it. But I think it's worth, to me, where I end is despite all of this, I still enjoy participating in sports. I still enjoy coaching sports. I still think it's worth trying to be competitive at the highest level. And it is possible despite some of this stuff. And in the end, ultimately noble to try and compete against this stuff. You're never going to, you're not going to in the near future going to see an abuse scandal in Russian gymnastics the way we just saw one in the United States. But I can say with 99% certainty that there are Russian coaches who are doing horrible, horrible things in the name of gymnastic success to beat the U.S. team. So that's my rant, guys.
I think
go ahead.
With that, because we were talking about that, and I said it's a lot like going back and watching 80s and 90s movies. Like you go back and watch 16 Candles, you're like, oh, this was such a feel-good comedy, so funny back in the day. And it's like, oh, that's date rape. What? It's the same as like Struck. I remember how great you feel, and all of a sudden you look at it now, and I'm like, oh my God, I feel complicit because I was like, I'm okay with that. I showed at a college team, like, all right, we saw Superbad on there, like, all right, let's cleanse the palate. We'll watch like Bad News Bears from the 70s. Put that on. I'm like, oh my God, what did that kid just call the other kid? And like they're dropping, and like the guy's driving around with like a beer with whiskey in it, and a bunch of kids running around in the backseat. Like it's like things that were in the context of then don't work now. And a friend of mine texted, like, it just shows how much we're growing all together. And so it's uncomfortable to grow like that, but it's true. It's one of those things where we would so many times like, well, see what she's learned about herself. So like later in life, she can go, I really don't want to do this travel expense report, but I once did a vault on a broken leg that could have ended my career, shattered so I can do this travel expense. So if that becomes the marker, the bar that everyone has to jump over and work, we're raising the wrong generation. Or the idea that Crowley kind of like yelling, well, you've got to learn how to take that. So when you get into a workplace, it's like, I don't want any of my kids to work for an employer that's yelling at them like that. That's not the case. I think this whole era of athlete empowerment and looking in and understanding kind of like the mental side that you guys have talked so much about, you see that all through athletic departments, even at Division III level, where having people there to talk with the athletes about the mental side of pressure of school and athletics and finding a job and stuff. I think kids that are in the millennial generation get bagged on a lot, but they've got more on them than ever before. And I think that's nice that we're coming to empathy for that. And it's unfortunate it has to be on basically the bodies of so many athletes in the past, for all of a sudden us to go, oh, wait, geez, that is crazy. Jumping on a leg. I mean, we always see the feel-good story movie ending. Well, what happens when that kid's paralyzed? Because that easily could happen too. She lands on her neck. That's it. Yeah. And so again, how fortunate it is that it didn't end in tragedy. But again, I'm glad we're able to kind of pump the brakes before that tragedy happens more often, because there are stories of the tragedy happening in the past like that.
I do have bad news for you though, Joel. I am a millennial, so probably nobody's coaching millennials anymore.
You're deservedly getting the shit. That's well earned. It's the wave behind you.
Right. They're like Gen Z or whatever.
They're doing fine. You're screwed though. Obviously,
right. We're still ruining everything. Yes. Guys, thanks so much for joining me. We'll do like a bit of a retrospective next week, I think. We'll have the full meet to look back on. We'll be able to make all our armchair judgments about who did well and who didn't. We will do a full autopsy on what countries did well, what countries will, as we said, get the speaking engagements at clinics all around the world, and who will have to go to the secondary small island coaching conferences. And I look forward to doing that with you guys. Thanks for joining me. Thanks to everybody for listening.